straight into my interview with this well-known Jamaican, Mr. Fitz Jackson. He is, in fact, an opposition lawmaker, and you would have heard by now that he has been criticizing the Bank of Jamaica for not being proactive, really, enough in proposing legislation to protect customers from financial fraud, especially considering recent reports of significant losses from commercial banks due to fraud. Jackson emphasizes the need for stronger regulatory measures and expresses disappointment in the BOJ's lack of assertiveness in this regard. Meanwhile, you'd have noted too that the Bank of Jamaica Governor Richard Biles was at pains to explain the challenges that they would have been facing in formulating legislation to consolidate regulatory functions under the what they call the Twin Peaks system, which can be further explained throughout our interview. But it's a really a big problem. I think the police said in the last 3 years the commercial banks suffered over $300 million losses in terms of this kind of fraud taking place. So it's a really big problem. And we're very happy to have with us my brother and friend, Mr. Fitz Jackson, joining us at this time. Good morning, Fitz.
Morning, Richie. Trust that you are doing well. And I'm going to instruct that you do well.
Yes, I am doing well. And I'm very happy that you could join us this morning. Sounding sounding quite alive and kicking there, Fitz.
Oh, boy, you have to, you know.
Yes, absolutely.
You have to pursue overcoming whatever challenges, which we will always have in life.
Indeed.
Like Samad said some years ago, back in the late 80s, was on a station that you used to be on.
Yes.
He said one of the virtues of pain is that it reminds you that you're alive.
Yes, true words.
When you have challenges, you have to remind us that we
are alive.
That's the brighter side of challenges.
Yes, sir. Now, to the matter at hand, Fitz, I want to ask you, you've spoken about legislative measures and so on, and the tardiness of the regulator, BOJ, in coming up with solutions, so to speak. But what specific legislative measures do you believe are necessary to better protect customers from financial fraud?
Well, Richie, you know, life, technology, and all those things are dynamic. They're always changing.
Yes.
Things that are happening now never used to be in the past. And so legislation has to keep up with changes which are taking place in the marketplace.
Yes.
In the case of the banks and the funds being held, deposits being held in their accounts, we know that in recent years you have a lot of online transactions. You have fraud taking place in the banking system. But what is imperative, and that's one of the points I try to underscore with the BOJ, banks are not just like any little business on the corner. Banks operate with a license, and that license gives the banks a privilege that no other institution gets, which is take people's deposits and be able to use them as a business to make money for themselves. But what comes with that privilege, that license privilege, is the duty and responsibility to protect those funds that are under your safekeeping, for which or from which you can use to do your business. That said, the level of fraud that we have been experiencing, or loss of monies of customers, depositors in the bank.
Yes.
It is clear that sufficient steps is not being taken to safeguard that, and that's a duty of the licensees of the BOJ. Mm-hmm. They are the regulators. They have that obligation to make sure that the persons, entities that they issue license to protect the people's money. And I emphasize Section 36 of the Banking Services Act, which is a duty of care provision that explicitly imposes that obligation. Obligation, not discretion. Mm-hmm. Obligation to protect the monies put under their care. The police had reported, and Deputy Commissioner of Police reiterated it at the sitting, the numerous reports that they have been getting of persons who lost money in the bank, and the bank just send them to the police. And the police really don't know what to do because the banks is now shifting the responsibility to the customer, right?
Yes.
There are many instances they have the capacity to protect what is in the bank. In fact, even if they have capacity, they can't control it. It's in the bank's charge. Now, let me hasten to say, negligence on the part of the customer can't be dismissed. You know, every one of us have an obligation to take due care. However, when you lose your money as a result of, not as a result of your failure, it must be those who is responsible for keeping it.
Reasonable, yes.
Now, the BOJ's response, which was, quite frankly, pathetic, right? Because they are saying at this stage that there's an inadequacy of legislation. It is Parliament that makes the laws. It is Parliament that makes the laws. So if you want laws to strengthen your ability, then it's your duty to bring that to the attention of the minister and the Parliament that you report to. Because you have an overarching responsibility to the people of the country. The BOJ as a regulator is not just an institution under the Ministry of Finance. It is constituted by an act of Parliament, which is the people's Parliament on behalf of the people. So if you want legislation to protect the people, go to the Parliament. And I have to remind them of that. So that is one of the things that I was very disheartened about, that they are now under the proposed set of legislative framework called the Twin Peaks to do what needs to have been done a long time. Because they never just wake up yesterday morning and found out this deficiency. People have been complaining about it for a long time.
For a very long time.
I never tabled my motion that caused, for example, the ATM standards to be put in place. It was a response to people's complaint.
So you see what's been happening as a shall we say a lack of responsiveness, both at within the banks and at the regulator, the BOJ.
Yes, and I go further, and at the political directorate, because we who are in Parliament, we are elected by the people, and we're supposed to have our pulse on what is happening out there. In much the same way that I would have heard people complaining about it, the Minister of Finance, the Prime Minister, and the Cabinet members would have heard too. It was not a secret leak to me. It's out there in the open space. And as I reminded the Parliament, and some other place, in the height of the cry of the people, we don't even hear a whisper from the Minister of Finance or the government. We never heard a whisper from the BOJ on their own. They had to be dragged out to even speak about it, much more to act on it. And that is unfortunate. Because who else to do but the regulators?
Absolutely.
And the government. That's what we are there for.
Do you see any challenges in balancing the need for regulatory oversight with pretty much ensuring the efficiency of the financial institutions?
Sure. And let me say, I'm welcome. I'm glad you asked that question, Richie, because I want to make it abundantly clear. I and all of us have a vested interest in a vibrant and profitable banking system. No modern society can exist without it. But we also know that there can be excesses. What is clear to all of us, not just myself, the banks pays scant regard to protecting the interests of the customer. You hear people talk about their experiences with complaints to the banks and how they are treated and how those complaints are dealt with. So we're saying that in as much as you have a duty to ensure the profitability and viability of the bank, you must balance that also with being responsive to the issues that affect your customers. And then, they talk about the cost of technology and all of that. I hear that argument all the time from the banks. But you ever hear in the last 20 years or so, any of them going out of business because they're not profitable?
No.
What they do sometimes is a scaremongering tactics. Oh, this will cause difficult for us and we have to consider close. None of them don't close. But you hear the profit reports by these multi-billion-dollar profits every year. Every year there are multi-billion-dollar profits. And also the multi-billion-dollar compensation for their employees. Senior managers, not the middle and down.
Mm-hmm.
We heard about recent settlements. Billions of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
Those are able, the banks are able to pay those monies because as many of the senior executives, their compensation are paid to the profit of the banks. So they end up having a vested interest in raking up the profits at whatever expense, right? At the expense of customer service, at the expense of sufficient or adequate protection of depositors. I am not making these up, Richie. These are out there in the open. Everybody see and know it. Mm-hmm. All I'm doing is just highlighting it.
Are you picking up from the banks in your deliberations that they are contemplating increasing fees in order to be able to address some of these concerns that you have been raising?
Well, you hear the argument from time to time when you talk about improved service and protection. It will cost and they have to pass the cost on. And this is where the regulator has been deficient. In the bill that I tabled in the House some years ago that the government uses majority to defeat, right? We are simply saying provide some minimum service. We are not saying you must provide perfect service, Provide a minimum level of service and we can discuss and debate what fully constitutes minimum. But we're saying that for taking people's money, these minimum amount of service, including minimum level of protection, must be provided. That's all. And in much as you, in the same way that you acknowledge that to pay the water bill for the bank, to pay the electricity bill, to pay the mortgage on the property that you lease or rent, right, or purchase, right, the employee compensation, the advertising, the PR that you spend so much money on, treat the cost of providing proper service in the same way and cut the crap out about passing it on to the consumer.
Yeah.
Next thing I must tell you that you must pay a special fee for the rent.
Mm-hmm.
You must pay a special fee for the light. So I don't buy that argument. And the Bank of Jamaica and the government must insist on it.
Yeah.
We've seen other jurisdictions, in other open market jurisdictions in the United States, in the UK, and other places. The government imposed these obligations, not just regulation, legislation. Mm-hmm. In August of last year, for example, the UK government passed a law that required the banks to make cash available either through the banking halls or through the ATM available in prescribed radius. That for example, in the rural areas, no more than 3 miles radius. You must have a facility to make cash available at no cost.
Okay.
Meaning you can't charge a fee.
Mm-hmm.
And in the urban areas, radius no greater than 1 mile at no cost. So this argument about over-regulation and crap, they try to put that on us. But the same banks who operate here and operate in other jurisdictions, they can't go there with that crap. Mm-hmm. Well, put it on us.
Yeah.
And our government, hook it up.
Wow.
And treat us as a banana republic.
Mm-hmm.
Right? All the things they can't do there, they are permitted to do here. And you have the Minister of Finance come to Parliament and defend it. It's appalling, and it's regrettable, and it's distressing.
Yeah, you have been
because of the government and its institutions, like the regulators, are not protecting the people. Yeah. What's the people have?
You have always been a lone voice pushing this particular line of argument, and we appreciate the fact that you are still at it. What can you tell us this morning by way of an update in terms of what's happening with the dormant account fees that they have been charging?
I raised 6 years or so ago, I had discovered, after I tabled that private member's bill, that one of the provisions, which is the dormant account, that the bill would deem illegal to impose, provision in the existing legislation prohibited. And I had raised a public alarm that I was going to have a lawsuit out for that. The bank suspended the charging of it. And that is welcome, because at least the depositors, especially our pensioners, right, who have monies in safekeeping and don't use it for a long time, is no longer able to have it depleted by these monthly dormancy fee. But I raised to the Bank of Jamaica that back then and up until now, and this is where the disgrace comes in, the Bank of Jamaica has not opened its mouth as to the legality of that charge, that I am contending, and my lawyers who I have spoken with, that it's an illegal charge. So coming out of the meeting on Wednesday, I have formally put before the BOJ to give me their internal legal opinion on whether or not the charging of the dormancy fee, though they are not doing it now, but they have collected billions of dollars from it. And if you collect money illegally, it is ill-gotten gain. Mm-hmm. So it has to pronounce on that. And secondly, I want the banks the BOJ to seek judicial review on the pronouncement of the legality of that charge. We can't say to Jamaica, those super rich persons can impose illegal fees or collect monies illegally, and they use the money, enjoy it, and the man who go and collect money in the corner in any community illegally go to jail for years. Mm-hmm. They can't say you have a just society where one set of laws for one set of people and another set for a set of laws that some can disobey, right, and benefit from in the disobedience. And there's another set of people in the society, if you breach the law, you're going to go to jail and go to prison.
Very important point. You said, and I quote, legislation will take long depending on the urgency attached to it.
Yes, because the Bank of Jamaica was trying to justify their tardiness on the basis of the complexity of the legislation to be promulgated to protect the consumers. Mm-hmm. And as I reminded the BOJ, during my years in Parliament, I have seen time and time again financial legislation come to the Parliament and passed, promulgated and passed in record speed, in bold speed. We have seen amendment to the Constitution done by the government in one day. So don't come tell me, say it is so complex that you can't fast track it. And secondly, there's a thing called interim legislation, where you can put in place legislative provision that can deal with an exigency, an urgent situation, while you develop more comprehensive legislation to deal with the overall problem. They have done no such thing. You know the reason why? Because there are a set of people in this country that is benefiting from the absence of those legislation, and therefore there's no urgency to it. A small group of people, the very super rich, right, are benefiting from the absence of these legislation. If you take 5 years to promulgate a legislation, and a group of people are making multi-billion dollars in profit because of the absence of that legislation, you think they have any urgency? They want you to promulgate any legislation with any haste. But the people who are losing the money, the billions of dollars, the unemployed, the pensioners, right? The marginally employed, the small business, the micro business operators, they are the ones that are suffering.
Continue to suffer. Yeah, Fitz,
nothing would have been done.
Yeah, we are out of time, but I want to thank you for keeping this rather hot button issue in the forefront, and we would definitely stay in touch with you to see how things develop going forward.
We will have to continue until we get some resolve.
Most definitely.
We get some resolution.
Yeah, man. Thanks so much, Fitz. Have a great day. Good talking as always.
My pleasure. And all the best to your listeners if I never mentioned that.
No worries. They appreciate that. Thank you very much. Fitz Jackson, ladies and gentlemen.